Alright guys, I'm gonna make a quick video on this particular book that I wrote. It's called Common Myths About Dogs Debunked. It's a very short book, very cheap too. You can find it on Amazon. And the reason I wrote this book is because there are a lot of myths out there, a lot of things that people say about dogs or dog training in general that are just simply not true. You've got things like, all pit bulls are aggressive. All pit bulls are great. All dogs want to please. So I wrote a bunch. I compiled a list of some of the most common myths that I have heard over the years. So I'm gonna go over one right now, and the one particular myth that I'm gonna go over today is all dogs want to please. So all dogs want to please is a very common myth. This is something I hear from pet people, especially from pet people. And surprisingly, I hear this from dog trainers as well. It's a myth because it's not true. If you think about this myth, if all dogs in fact wanted to please, there would be no such thing as dog training. That wouldn't be an industry. This industry would be completely just devastated. And it would be easy to have a well-behaved dog. And that's not the case. The reason why the dog training is a booming industry is because dogs in fact don't want to please. They don't want to please you. They don't want to do whatever you want to do. They don't want to make you happy necessarily. That's not true. And so the reason why people say things like, dogs want to please is because sometimes you see dogs that are very biddable. Sometimes you see dogs that are very trainable, that are very dependent. And these dogs actually look like they want to please. And it's very easy to fall into that and say, well, that dog just wants to please because it's always looking at me, it's always following me, it's listening to me, it's kind of, hanging out by my side, it's checking in with me. These things make it appear as though the dog wants to please, especially if you're kind of new, if you're kind of a novice dog trainer, or if you're a pet person who doesn't know any better. But don't be mistaken, even in those situations, they're not really doing it to please you per se. There's a further agenda to that, and that agenda is that it is convenient for them. The reason dogs act in give you appeasement signals, they quote unquote want to please, it's because it is ultimately good for their situation. They're doing it because by doing so, they are avoiding confrontation, or they're getting a reward. Whether that reward is avoiding confrontation, avoiding discomfort, or whether that reward is I get treats, I get to spend time with my owner. But there is an agenda. Think about this right here. You've got dogs that are quote unquote wanting to please, and then you also have dogs that they just want to leave. They just want to leave you, right? And typically when people think about this real quick, they think of huskies, for instance, right? It's a very common thing. People think about huskies as dogs that are just, they just want to leave you. They're very independent. I've seen huskies and other, I'm just using huskies as an example because typically people think about huskies and very independent dogs. But I've seen other dogs that are very independent. I actually have one of them. They're very independent dogs, and it doesn't matter how good of a trainer you are, or how good of an owner you are, or how much you love that dog. That dog could be very well trained, but in the end, that dog, the more independent dog, will not feel as compelled to spend all the time with you and check in with you every 5 seconds as some of you other dogs will. And it's got nothing necessarily to do with your ability as an owner, your ability as a trainer. These are just personality traits. And people don't realize that not all dogs want to quote unquote please. You've got some very independent dogs and you've got some very dependent dogs. And of course, you've got dogs in the middle. Generally, your very dependent dogs, these are the dogs that want to stay by your side. These are the dogs that are very biddable. These are the dogs that are very trainable. These are the dogs that are very easy to motivate. These are the dogs that love to spend time with you or checking in with you constantly. And these are the dogs that people look at and go, quote unquote, this dog wants to please. And that's not the case. The dog's just more dependent, but the dog has an agenda. And then you got on the flip side, you other dogs are more independent. And these are the dogs that feel more confident, more comfortable by themselves, with themselves. They don't feel the need to be next to you all the time. They don't feel the need to check in with you all the time. These are the type of dogs that could roam out for like days before they come back. These are the types of dogs that, if you're not, if they're not very well trained. All right, whereas there are some dogs on, back to the dependent side. These are your very trainable dogs. These are your dogs that you can have them on leash and they rarely leave you. They just come back and check in with you. Again, it goes back to the personality of the dog, not necessarily their desire to please you, because that is not a thing. It's not true. They don't want to please. So that is something that we as dog people, and especially as dog trainers, we need to realize that is just a myth. It sounds nice, but think about it. If all dogs wanted to please, there would be no dog trainers. If all dogs wanted to please, every single dog would be a nice dog. And that's not true. It doesn't happen. It's not real. It's just a myth.